of the day, the client is the one that makes the ultimate calls. And so as a consultant, you in contrast to being a chief restructuring officer, where you're actually, appointed as an officer of the debtor, when you're a consultant, it's all about persuasion, right? But at the end of the day, it's in the short term, it's your client that has responsibility for making the final decisions. And then, of course, in the intermediate term, if things aren't turning around, then obviously the lender has the cards to play, because they might, decide that they're going to move in and foreclose, or, advocate for some sort of liquidation or something like that. So who ultimately has the decision-making authority sort of depends upon where you are in the process. But invariably, as a consultant, it's either your client or ultimately the bank.
When and how did you delegate?
Again, the type of work I do, Michael, it's so not to digress, but earlier in my career, I was actually chief operating officer of Sears Automotive. So at one point in my career, I had 25,000 people reporting to me. I had 12 direct reports, and obviously thinking about kind of motivating and how you motivate and to get a large organization to all kind of move in the same direction. Thinking about delegation and stuff like that is critically important. By contrast, back to middle market turnaround assignments, and specifically the case or the example that we're talking about now, there wasn't much in the way of delegation per se, because it's when you do these types of engagements, you're rolling up your sleeve and you're diving in, and if I've got somebody that's working for me that's doing the 13-week cash flow or something like that, obviously that's been delegated. But again, it's very hands-on, and it's we're all engaged in doing the work, so it's not delegating in the classic sense that I think that you're trying to touch upon.
How did you approach disagreement?
Well, it's usually disagreement is, might come if, I think there's disagreement is more what I would call sort of creative tension on trying to identify the best way forward. And when there's disagreement, it's you really got to kind of talk it through, right? I mean, if you're thinking that one approach may be the best way, and somebody else, whether it's the bank or your client, thinks it might be something else, you talk through the issues, and hopefully, you're working with bright people that are motivated to ultimately do the right thing. So my experience has been that if there's disagreement, invariably you can kind of work through it by talking it out and trying to make it fact-based arguments. So for me, very rarely have I ever seen disagreements that translate into an inability to move forward. For me, it's just kind of speed bumps along the way, if that makes sense.
It does. Did you seek to empower others on your team or within the organization? If so, how? Well,
again, it's a small, at least from the consulting side, it's a small group, and everybody knows the role, and so are kind of naturally empowered. Part of what you do as a consultant, of course, is try to teach best practices. Something like a 13-week cash flow, which, as I know is kind of a building block of a successful turnaround, and is one of the first things that you focus on. But one thing I tell clients is that a 13-week cash flow is actually a great management tool, and so you want to teach them how to build their own 13-week cash flow going forward, so they themselves are staying on top of their liquidity. And so I think there's kind of a natural empowerment by helping share best practices for not only how to deal with turnaround situations, but how to manage your company more effectively. So I think the empowerment comes by virtue of the work that you do, and the information and the insights that you impart with your client.
Thank you. How would you describe the flow of information within your team or within the organization?
Well, again, as I indicated on an earlier question, part of working with a small team is as the consultant coming in, is you're in frequent discussion. So, that's not an issue. And then again, you're also in frequent, and this one issue I'm just dealing with now. This doesn't have to do anything with the case that I'm kind of alluding to, but I'm on the phone right now, 3 or 4 times. I mean, I've been on the phone. It's only 4:00, and I've probably talked 4 or 5 times to my client today on some of the issues that we're dealing with and things. And so, if you're doing your job and rolling up your sleeves and diving in, you're talking to people, because at the end of the day, it's all about the people and the people that you're working with, and trying to make sure there's good dialogue across, as I said, the different stakeholders.
Along those lines, how would you describe your communication style?
Diplomatic but blunt, which might be a little bit, may seem sort of naturally in conflict, but I think you got to recognize, again, you're dealing with people and you're dealing with emotions, but you also got to be candid. I said blunt, but what I really mean is kind of candid and transparent. And if there's issues here, you've got to identify them and talk them through. So I think I think people view me as kind of a straight shooter, and I'm not here to play games. I'm here to help find a solution that works for the client and the other stakeholders. And the only way you're going to effectively find those solutions is to have frequent and honest communication.
The next item explores your approach to risk and decision making on a 1 to 7 scale. In a response to declining performance, which best describes the approach that you took in this particular instance? 1 is a preference for being conservative towards risks, decisions, and information sharing. 7 is a preference for searching for new approaches, which may or may not be riskier. And 4 is neutral.
Yeah, I have to confess, I'm not sure I fully understood the scale between 1 and 7. So let me answer this more broadly. So again, your tolerance to try something new or to take drastic action is an outcome of the situation assessment. Because one of the things, of course, you do, we talked about a 13-week cash flow, but a 13-week cash flow is under this broader umbrella of doing an immediate situation assessment. And so, the way you move forward, or the solutions that you propose, which may or may not be judged as risky, is dependent upon the situation that you're facing and the issues that you're confronting. And so I'm not sure actually how to rank that, because every situation could be different. I will say, just more broadly, I have found over the course of my career, not only as a turnaround consultant, but when I was chief operating officer of Sears Automotive, and I've had operations reporting to me, that a lot of times the solutions are kind of actually embedded somewhere within the organization, and that if you talk to people and have good dialogue, a lot of people within a company or within a division actually have some good ideas on how to address the issues that you're facing. It's really an issue of uncovering those ideas and then figuring out how to implement those ideas so that you get actionable results. So. That was kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but